you got to set up your business and put vacations in your system. So we are not a grind business. You work for 11 weeks, take 2 weeks off. Work for 11 weeks, take 2 weeks off. Do that 4 times. Every quarter, you need to have some sort of vacation. Why are we sending all of our resources to other countries for them to produce it and sell back to us at 10 times the price? All of history is based on war. All of these borders and what countries, it's based on war and people taking over something that somebody else owned.
Kill or be killed. Welcome back, everybody, to the DC Talks podcast with David Chinelli. It's a brand new year, 2025, man. We finally made it. Hope you guys had an amazing Christmas period with your friends and family. And we're back at the DC headquarters with the main man himself, Mr. David Chinelli. Mr. DC.
So I laugh at these guys if they're watching this video, how awkward like we're so far apart. We're like, it's all right.
You know, it reminds me of like Skip and Shannon, like when they're together, like when they're so far apart, but like they'll do a fist bump and they're stretching all the way out. It was so awkward, but it's so funny. But that's what makes it. But DC, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, brother.
How you doing?
Doing very well, man. A little well rested. Took the foot off the gas for, got a couple of deals while I was, away, but it wasn't. I told the team, the guys, and we were talking off air. I mentor a number of agents, and we get together Tuesdays. And I was telling them, and I think I said this the last pod, don't take your foot off the gas until December 20th. But after December 20th, which was a Friday, take your foot off the gas. If something comes to you, obviously work in your business. That's great, but don't be looking for business. You need some time break. Your brain needs some rest. Your body needs rest. Like last year, and we're going to run through the numbers here, was the hardest market we've had again in decades. We've had the hardest 18 months between the middle of 2023 to last year. I can't even tell you how many agents have left the business. It has been that difficult.
Bloodbath.
It's a bloodbath, right? And it was one of those things that I was saying to the team yesterday. Where I said down, like, guys, you have to bake in your rest periods.
Yeah.
So Natalie and I have already set up, like, we're going for March break. We're going away. We have also friends of ours are getting married in this summer in Greece. They're our whole family, like, we're going to Greece for 2 weeks. I'm probably going to, hopefully, to Nashville a couple of times this year. So I was saying to them, guys, you have to put it into your calendar. Then you have something to look forward to. I had a really good coach when I first started, and his name was Rob Vivian. I think we talked about that, and I liked his philosophy. Right? Obviously, like, I'm not his student anymore. Just things change. Sometimes you just kind of outgrow some people, and I think both of us are directions different. And but for good agents, somebody like really starting out, I still think he's amazing. Your mindset is very, very powerful when it comes, especially real estate. And what he always said to us is like, you got to set up your business and put vacations in your system. So we are not a grind business. You work for 11 weeks, take 2 weeks off. Work for 11 weeks, take 2 weeks off. Do that 4 times. Every quarter, you need to have some sort of vacation because this business is grinding and it affects you mentally and physically. You'll burn out.
Yeah. And my mom also mentioned the same thing to me. She was just like, Owen, we see you like every other month or so. And every time you call me, it's like you're always talking about, I got another meeting, I got a meeting. And she calls me Bubba, right? It's her nickname. It's like Bubba. Like,
I just call my daughter Bubba.
Yeah.
When your kid is Bubba, like it's
Bubba, just little, like, and I'm her first son, so like she has like a soft spot for me, and she's just like, before you know it, all these meetings are gonna be like the same way you've been telling me back from 2023, 2024, now 2025. Your life is gonna pass you by, and if you don't take those moments to plan, like, hey, I'm gonna come to Sarnia for 2 weeks, your dad's getting old, I'm getting old, right? These are the things that matter. Like, take time for yourself. Like, don't let life pass you by just because you're in this grind period. Be intentional. Same thing you're telling the team with Lori, Coach, and everything. If you're not intentional with your plans and the things that outside of like your business, the things that you do, you're going to be depleted first and foremost. And you're not going to have the energy to replenish yourself to be back stronger for your business. So I completely agree with what you're saying.
And one side note for family life too, I always laugh when people say, well, I have like with their parents.
Yeah.
Oh, I have so many years left. I'm like, how many times this year? We talked about this one, the other pod, and I want to reiterate this one more time. How many times did you see your parents this past year?
Like less than 10.
Which is more than some people living out of town.
Yeah.
Some people only get to see their parents 4 times. And I'm like, so how long do you think your parents are going to live? Say it's 10 years. So say it's 4 and it's 10 years. You're only going to see them 40 more times if you continue this way. It's not 10 years. It's 40 times.
40 times.
And for you, if you continue this trend, it's only if they're going to live another 10 years, let's say, I don't know how long old your parents just say.
Yeah.
That's only 100 times.
Yeah. When you
It's blew my mind. I think we talked about like how I pray with my mom in the mornings at Coach, and I pray that we read the Bible in the mornings. And I love that. So 5 days a week, I talk to my mom, and Saturdays too, but now I'm on the phone with her almost every single day. And it's, hopefully it's enriching. Like I feel it's different in our relationship. We talk about a lot of things in the mornings. And it's just, and we make sure God's in there too.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. You got to make those spaces you got to be intentional. And that's one thing I also got to give you. Like I started praying in the morning as well. I actually, when I was doing my 2025 planning, morning gym, prayer, like non-negotiable. Non-negotiable, 7 to 7:30, Bible verse, prayer, start the day. Like I've
Amazing.
actually invested in myself to actually have like a proper day. And I feel better. I feel like uplifted, even though if anything happened the previous day, we're ready to go. So I got to give you props to that because I really admire your discipline and your dedication to your mind, body, and spirit. And it's had a lot of influence on me. So I got to give you credit.
Good.
And now I'm just taking it stride by stride, man.
All right, on that note, now let's go. So that was 2024. We're going to get into some of the stats, and Owen wanted to talk. I think it's a great opportunity you have right now. Let's talk about what happened in real estate in 2024 and what we're looking forward to 2025. Is that where we're going with this, Owen?
Yes. So let's set the stage, right? So 2024 started with optimism for a market rebound, but it didn't take off as expected. Why do you think there was such a delay in the market recovery?
I think the Bank of Canada, I think the government just didn't realize, or maybe they did on purpose, didn't act quickly enough for a number of things. And I just don't think that they realized how poor the country really was, right?
Yeah.
We were marred by the numbers of inflation, right? Because and again, I've talked about this in the past. Inflation has, of course, it has its number. We need to regard inflation, but there are some metrics in inflation which really don't affect us, right? So, for example, like it was oil, and like oil is one of the things. Like sometimes when oil goes up, inflation goes up. Like we had no control over that. But I don't think they really understood how poor the people were. There was a stat we talked about before when you took out, all of a sudden inflation dropped so much, and then if you took out housing, which the government had a direct impact on inflation, as well as the carbon tax. If they would have reduced those quicker, we probably would put more money in people's pockets. At one point, I think our inflation was at 1.6%. In reality, if you took out housing in that, inflation was only 0.4%. So remember, we talked about this. So and if you think about that, that means some of the goods or services weren't even getting as much as they were last year because not everything was 0.4% above. That was the average, which means some of the people were working for less money than they did last year. So I really believe that it took too long to start increasing interest rate and the decreasing interest rates. And that toll really took effect on people. So the first interest rate cut, which was 1/4 of a point, again, was a small quarter.
Nothing.
They're like dipping their toe in. And honestly, that affected us because it's like nothing really happened, right? So the effect was, it's not enough. Like people are getting scared. I'm like, oh my God, these are not the rates we expect. Like we are starving. People like, I've never seen, like I said, how many agents have left the business before in my life. I've never seen how many people have gone to, if you're out of Toronto area, we had more people hit like three to like every third family or something like that was going to the food bank. People couldn't afford groceries. So then you're talking about housing? Like people can't afford to live.
Yeah.
Right. So then they started decreasing another consecutive interest rate cuts. And by the end of the year, like they were cutting, like we cut 1%, we think between November and December, and it still had zero effect. Like if you look, we'll run the numbers, explain that. Like it took too long. And then also, I think as well as the mortgage numbers also took too long. In the past, before December 15th of this year, in order to pay for anything over $1 million, even your principal residence, you had to put 20% down. So if you paid for a house $999,999, you could put less than 20%. Say you want to put 10%. Let's call it $100,000. But as soon as you put that $1 more, you had to come up with an extra $100,000. So that really affected the market because they had that in place. I think it was like 2017, I think, when Kathleen Wynne's government, when they had all those announcements, mortgage rates, stress tests came out. So this is 8 years. They've never increased that number. They never went with inflation. So that barrier of entry was huge.
Yeah.
That also affected the market. So up until now, on December 15th, now people are realizing, okay, I don't have to come up with that 20% down. That market above over $1 million now is starting to get some activity.
Yeah.
So there's a number of things. Again, there's a lot of things that happened in 2024, which I just think the whole government, the Bank of Canada, just blew it on, right? Too slow to act on the interest rates, too slow to have the mortgage rules as well.
When you look at the Bank of Canada, right, when they're looking at assessing whether or not to make an interest rate cut, what are some of the factors that they look at to make that decision? Okay, so we had several of them this past year. Put yourself in the Bank of Canada, like I'm someone who doesn't know, or the listener doesn't know what they're doing.
Right.
What are their thoughts? What are they looking at to make that decision? And when can they predict to say, okay, today is March. By all these factors, we're looking at making an interest rate cut, let's say in 2 months.
So the problem with seeing it this way, because the interest rate effect really doesn't take its full effect until 18 to 24 months after an interest rate cut, especially with drastic changes, right? Yeah. There are some overnight things, but it takes a little while for it to play out. So when they started increasing the interest rates back in 2022, it took a couple of years for it to take its real effect. And that's why we're seeing from 2022 to 2024, that's when the shit hit the fan.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. What are they looking at? Well, the biggest player they always say is inflation. Now, inflation's a huge problem. The target market, when I was an analyst, they used to tell us they try to keep between 1% and 3%, ideally at 2%. That keeps the economy going. Your GDP stays good. Everything is proper, I think, at that point. And that's a thriving economy. A little bit of a percent increase. When they had the artificially low interest rates, we had, I think inflation was at 7-8%. It was high. It was not sustainable, and they took too long to decrease that. So inflation, and in case you don't know what inflation is what you pay for today as opposed to last year, how much of a basket of goods increase. And they use that. So they use that in the overall market. So if I say inflation 7%, say you went to the grocery store today, your groceries would be 7% higher than they were last year. That's an easy way of saying it, right?
The best way to look at it, like if you go spend $50 at Loblaws, you're getting like a ketchup bottle. I think I mentioned last time, it's like $8. Eggs now it's like $4. A rack of chicken is like $20. So
it's gone out of control.
So now you're buying 5 items for $50. Maybe 5 years ago, you could spend that $50. You can get veggies, bread, eggs.
You get a whole basket.
A whole basket of food, right?
Yeah,
so
instead of handful.
It just shows you what inflation does. And like the power of your spending power has like drastically decreased.
Right. So that's one of the factors.
Yeah.
Second factor, one of the reasons why they didn't decrease rates was the Canadian dollar.
Yeah.
Right. So you're looking for foreign investment. When you decrease inflation, right? Sorry, you decrease interest rates, they have less in foreign investments, therefore your Canadian dollar drops.
Yeah.
So what Canada was hoping was that the US would drop their interest rates, overnight rate quicker, or before we did. We didn't drop our interest rates to 50 basis point, get really aggressive until the US hinted that they were going to do it. Because again, if you decrease rates too fast, Canadian to US, and now it's really effective now, I think we're at 1.44. So every single US dollar is worth almost $1.50 of ours. Thanks, Trudeau. But those are the other things they're looking at, right? Yeah. So it's the Canadian dollar. So you got to be careful of the interest rates, right? And then obviously then you're looking at unemployment, right? So we have the highest unemployment we've had in 7 years. Now, since Trudeau's taken over government, all those numbers have been affected. Inflation got out of hand, right? Our GDP is the lowest since, I don't know, before. I don't know how the lowest it's been. I don't know how low it's been, but when Trudeau got into government 9 years ago, the Canadian GDP and the US GDP were on par. Right? If people don't know GDP, it's basically your gross domestic product. It's what you earn, right? So per capita. So earnings. Now we're at 60%. We're at 60%.
And you know the thing
60% decrease in 9 years. Do you
Stephen
know
Harper,
how hard it is to deplete your GPD? Like you have to try your ass.
That was intentional.
You have to be intentional.
Yeah. And Stephen Harper actually mentioned this when he predicted this, and I actually rate Stephen Harper so much because when Stephen Harper was like going against Trudeau, everyone was just so seduced by Trudeau. He's young, he's handsome, and then Stephen Harper is
He's an idiot.
he's the old oligarch. He's just like the old guy.
Again, I'm Stephen Harper. I have a bone to pick with that motherfucker.
Oh, you do, eh?
He didn't try for that election.
What do you mean you didn't try?
Did you remember? He kind of he phoned it in.
I was a little bit young, so I wasn't really in
So
it,
I was there. And to be honest with you, I voted Trudeau 9 years ago because I thought Harper was burnt out.
Really, eh?
Yeah, so you can tell by the campaigns. He didn't really try. I think he was just done.
He's done.
And that problem is like, if you're done, step down, right? Now look at the damage that Trudeau's done. So we talk about the GDP. The Canadian dollar, right, at one point, when I was an analyst, was higher than the US dollar. It was fucking 2008. But at one point, but again, the dollar was pretty strong.
Stronger.
And we had low unemployment, probably the lowest we've had in years, right? So in decades, right? So all those trends have now been reversed in 9 years. And again, I think it was intentional.
Why do you think it was intentional?
Because I don't know. I think it was intentional because I just don't think that, I think he wanted to deplete the country to a point where, actually, I don't know. That's a good point. I just think it was intentional because I just think he's a narcissist. He just does what he wants to do. I really don't have a theory about that. I don't have anything concrete on that because the guy's a liar. He lies about everything. But I'm wondering if you deplete a dollar, if your dollars are worth more, you could go purchase things in the Canadian dollar. Look how much money, apparently his own personal wealth has increased. So if you deplete a dollar, you deplete the resources, and you're sitting on money. Can you go in and buy certain things?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And again, he's only about himself, and his family. Like he should be in jail for the stuff that he's pulled.
Even the stuff he did with We, remember the We organization,
my
like
God.
stuffing his mom's pockets and everything.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's the intention behind it. I don't know. But the numbers doesn't seem to me how it can't be unintentional.
Yeah. So with that, right? So Trudeau has now announced that he's stepping down. It doesn't really make an impact because he's still holding the
Although
seat.
the market's rallied.
The market's rallying. So let's get into that, right? So let's look at the market trends predictions for 2025. This news just hit us about this month, first week of the year. By this time comes out, what do you think his news and everything that is coming out with him is going to impact the real estate market?
So I think the real estate markets was anticipating this, right? So let's look back. Let's look at the year in review, right? Our numbers between 2024 to 2023 decreased just around 1%, the average
Yeah.
sale price, right? So we had more sales. I think the sales were, let me just see over here. Let me double check here. Sales were like 166,000, I believe we had. So annual home sales amount to 67,610. So there's more choice for buyers. They ended up considering the buyer's market. So the average sale price was 1,170,600, and whereas the previous year was, I think it was 1,126. So we had sale, 1,126,263, $260,000. And a lot of that was because we had a whole year of uncertainty with him in there, even the decrease in rates. So there was just so many people, I think, couldn't afford the market. So I'm setting up what I think 2025 is going to be. This is why I'm running these numbers, right? I think, and we also had more people put up their homes for sale. So that also, crushed the numbers a little bit. So more choice, right? Simple economics, more choice, less demand, the price decreases. What I think a lot of people were anticipating was a change of regime, right? They didn't feel comfortable, with the Liberal government. I still think that, so I think this will have an impact. These changes finally with the housing laws, I was saying the mortgage laws, those didn't come into effect until December, right? December 15. To that effect, our December this year we had less, both our sales were 1% less than they were last year.
Yeah.
Like sort of the average sale price, and everything depleted. Again, I think a lot of people were waiting December 15 to see what happens coming up the next year. So with the announcement of Trudeau coming in, we have another Bank of Canada announcement, probably another 50 basis point cut. And it's a brand new year. I think there's going to be more after this year. People are going to accumulate more money because now they have more expendable income because of those 1.75% decreases. Remember, we had 3 quarter point changes, 150 base. So an additional 50 basis points.
Yeah.
More people have more money for a down payment. The $1.5 million is going to affect. I just feel that this market is now an environment where people are like, okay,
Primed
the
up.
worst is behind us.
Yeah.
And now we have hopefully a Polyev or a PC government coming in that's going to have our back. The mortgage laws are better, and we have more expendable income. I think the 2025 is going to be a great market.
With the government, right, and the Bank of Canada, right? You mentioned Trudeau's now announced that he's leaving. What does a prime minister have in terms of an effect, in terms of influencing the Bank of Canada's decision? Like, because we can say here, like, okay, Trudeau, the Bank of Canada.
Yeah.
What is that relationship?
So there's controversy over this all the time, Owen. I think that they dictate them what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And people say, well, this is their own independent, the Bank of Canada's own independent. I'm like, of course, they make their own decisions, but it's heavily influenced by the government.
Heavily influenced.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
They have discussions about it too. And be like, don't believe it like they live in a silo. That's impossible. I think they're talking about like, with their finance minister, what's going to happen? How do we do this? There's got to be some sort of talks back and forth. There is talks. We know that there is.
There's talks, eh?
Of course.
Second thing is, right, this loan to income ratios, right? So we keep hearing about loan to income ratios becoming a bigger issue in 2025. Can you explain why this might become such a focal point for buyers and lenders?
Yeah. So loan to income, like our loan, obviously our income is not on pace with our housing. And obviously, so with housing increase, your loan increases and you're not earning the same amount. Have you seen those charts from like 1971? How they're like so close and how they've like spread?
Yeah.
Well, two things. I think if you're smart enough, you know how to use, not smart enough, sorry. If you have the money and you have the knowledge of how to do it, you could use the market to your advantage, right? If you're right now, if you're buying a condo in Toronto market, like again, this is ridiculous. I was running these numbers. I think it was the average this December, right? If you're buying in the 416, the average sale price is $719,000 was last month. I was just running numbers as opposed to May of like their previous year. They're at 766. Like that's how much they fluctuate. Again, that's a huge drop, right? So you can use the market if you're able to get a mortgage and ride the wave, buy low and ride high. So there is a potential for people to make income, right? And a lot of times that also with your house, right? If you can afford a home, sure, loan to investment is going to be hard, but it's all about the qualifications. If you're able to make those payments, your house can earn you your retirement, right? It's a sad fact. And why is that? Well, the reason why that we're in this position is that we didn't build enough houses. We're building the same number of houses that we built 25 years ago, where the population is growing exponentially. Think about it. We've had a couple million people in the last couple of years join Canada. We're still building houses from 25 years ago where we had under 1 million people. Like it doesn't make sense. And that's the problem. So, and right now, I don't know if you've seen what's happening in the market. We've talked about this before. The pre-construction market has been hammered because with all the red tape, the builders are building, like the price point that they're getting, when you're getting the keys as to when you purchase it. So you might have purchased it 4 years ago thinking the price was going to be on par for what you purchased it, if not higher. Well, the valuation's coming in less and the lenders aren't allowing you they're not giving you the mortgage, or you have to come up with that difference. A lot of people are walking away. So the builders are having problems with foreclosures.
Yeah.
The builders are having problems with making projects. So right now they're turning off the tap. So we don't anticipate any large amount of investment in pre-construction from the builders to build this infrastructure for at least 2 years. So people looking to purchase, think about that 4 years from now, there's going to be no houses in 2029 and 2030. You're just fueling the housing crisis.
Yeah. And also one thing I also want to mention too is that with Trudeau leaving, this might actually bring some renewed confidence with the whole thing with immigration being like halted a little bit. With Polyev, what he's trying to do is he's trying to take away the people who are here on maybe the student visas, who want to actually demand that they deserve to stay. Have you seen those protests with these students and these, not even students, man, these are grown folks studying some certificate at York University. You know, it's actually interesting. I think I was invited for a talk to discuss social media and everything. This is like back when we were Uplift Studios. And when I walked in the class, I mean, it was an all South Asian community, and like nothing wrong with South Asian community, but you can see the influence of every single class I was walking by York. It was like the same group that were taking these classes. And the professor, who was a good friend of mine at the time, because we worked together for Hustle Over Everything, he gave me and Alex at the time, a brand deal to do something for an app, right? For a delivery e-commerce app. And he's like, oh, and these people are actually here not for learning. They're here to use this as a way to get residency. So with a changing government, right? Poilievre is predicting that he's going to be the prime minister. He did an amazing interview with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Common sense approach. I don't know if you've seen that.
I saw the assessment stuff, but I didn't have the whole time to watch it. But yeah,
When you do have a chance, take some time to watch. It's an amazing show. He answers every question. He doesn't filibuster or anything like that.
oh, a prime minister who actually answers the
His
question.
questions, I know. How
Hey,
refreshing.
what color is your shirt? Well, yesterday I wandered down to the corner store. I'm like, Justin, what color is your shirt? And that's an interesting question. The fabric from the my God, I hate that guy.
Oh my God.
I'm not sorry. As Christians, we're not supposed to hate anybody, but come on, I loathe that guy.
nauseous.
It's just answer a question. And I always people push back like no politicians answer questions. Have you not watched the House of Commons?
Yeah.
I always say like they have like the PCs have been answering questions. It's the filibusters, like the liberals.
Yeah.
What number is on your sheet? Well, these numbers were prepared. Like it drives me nuts. But yeah, sorry.
Yes, that one was like he bodied that journalist.
Oh, that was great.
He was just like, so what do you mean by that? Who's they? What?
Let me ask you.
I know there's some people who didn't like Poilievre, and I'm like, you got to give the guy a chance. Now, again, the problem with Poilievre, I've said this over and over again, it's not actually him.
What is it?
That Trudeau's burnt down the government so bad, and I think that's also maybe that's the intention was the last one. He's on his way out. He knew he was on his way out. He's burning it to the ground. That he's going to give his liberal government a chance in the next election, not this one coming up, the following one, because they burnt it so hard to the ground. It's going to take at least 10 years for them to rebuild. And Poilievre is the one who's tasked with doing this. He's not going to be able to turn it around in one term. Are you kidding me? He's not God. It's impossible. It took Trudeau 9 years to burn it to the
mess it
ground,
out,
and bad.
Yeah.
So imagine you just can't turn everything around in 5 years or 4 years or wherever how long this term is going to be.
Yeah, and that's where I was going with him mandating that, hey, let's give back our jobs to Canadians, right? Because a lot of affordability is because Canadians can't really afford.
Well, that being said, I've said this before. When Trump said he's going to tariff us another 25%, I'm like, good. And people are like, what is wrong with you? And I'm like, maybe we'll start taking back and doing like what the Chinese do, or what other like saying like, well, they have like 200% tariffs, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you want to bring your American car in here? Fine, pay like 5 times. Like it makes sense. I'm like, maybe we will start building our jobs over here. Why are we sending all of our resources to other countries for them to produce it and sell back to us at 10 times the price?
Yeah, it's insane. And that's what I'm saying. So if the houses are not, if you're predicting 2029, because you mentioned these houses are being built, all this immigration coming through, and then we have to push them all out, right? Because all those jobs are being taken by these, workers coming from abroad. Do you think
Service jobs, by the way.
But do you see those jobs are critical because if the young kids can't get started in the workforce,
That's right.
If they can't get a job at Timmy's, if they can't get a job at Harvey's, stuff that we
Some of these, wait a second, did you know with the reason also why some of these like our kids, that are like, I say our, my and Natalie's kids might not have a chance is like they get government grants based on race.
yeah.
Like, so my kids are screwed.
Yeah.
They have to get a family member. Like, they get another 20. Like, somebody saying goes, why would I'm going to hire a South Asian person. I'm going to get 20% more. Like, if I get savings. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, why do you think everyone is still lined up for Tim Hortons? There's people like for one job tying up. Like,
Even LCBO too. Like I saw a wrap around on LCBO beside No Frills. It was insane. And it's the same group of people.
they
Like,
got to get rid of that shit.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm like, with kids, I think everybody should be able, if they're able to have a job if they want to. I also, you remember we talked about this about Waterloo, how they had a grant. And they said, if you're white and you're heterosexual, don't apply. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what the hell? Like, if you're able for the job, like, why is now race a big problem? Like, the liberals love race, even though they say they're not racist. They're the ones that love race.
They love the
They love
wokeism.
the race. They love sexuality, all that stuff too. It's like, can we just, like, if you want to make it a fair play, give somebody a number. I know that sounds terrible. But block out their names, see their abilities, and then let them figure out for the job, like if that's the person you want to hire. Fuck the race, gender, all that bullshit. Like, whatever. Are you the right person for the job? Can we not get back to that?
Common sense approach.
Common sense.
That's what Poilievre wants to do.
Yeah.
You know, so if we take out the immigration policies, let's say that they go back to what they were before. Apply the right way. Student visa, if you're here and you're done your schooling, go back home, apply to come back as a permanent resident. Don't try and demand. And that's the thing we've allowed these groups, and just not the South Asian, but just in general, like what immigration has come to be, is they feel entitled to stay here. So that mentality, that culture, I think just needs to be wiped over, because it starts with like the mentality we've created now, DC, because now people believe they can actually come here, and the actual immigrants, like my family, other people's families, they have to put in work to become Canadians. Right now, people are short circuiting, and now they think they can just come here.
Did I send you that video?
Of which one?
So he's a realtor, local realtor, and he got a comment from somebody that works to place some of these people, and he's like, so some of these people to place some of the immigrants,
Good people, we're done here.
to place some of the immigrants coming in, and they
Yeah.
get something like $3,200 a month plus child, and they're getting so much money they're not working.
Yeah,
and
they
there's
get
like,
free
well,
rents.
childcare is too expensive, and they feel entitled to it. And he's like, childcare is $10 a month. You only have to pay $10 a month.
Yeah.
And they're refusing because they're making all this money without having to work. He goes, the person that was commenting goes, they're almost making more money than I'm making, and I'm working.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, and like, this is ridiculous. And he's pushing back. I'm like, this is what's happening with this government. And he goes, and when their funding gets refused, they come back. They feel entitled. They come back. I deserve this money. I came to this country. You got to give me this money.
It's
and
stolen
it's like,
land. You hear what they say?
it's a stolen what?
They say stolen land. Like, we deserve to stay here because this was stolen land. So
It's
that
argument also makes me laugh, because if you look back at all ancient history, every single
Everything
country,
is stolen.
everything is stolen.
It's stolen.
It's
man.
been stolen. So I also don't agree with the whole, like, I'm not getting into the Canadian stuff too, but it's like, it's funny. It's like, but that's what happened. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and so Europeans came to Canada, they took over the land. Well, what do you think happened in Europe? Other Europeans came in and took over them.
the land,
That's what they would do, right? Like, all of history is based on war. All of these borders and what countries, it's based on war and people taking over something that somebody else owned.
Kill or be killed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So well, sure, we should respect the person, but how did you get here first? Like,
Yeah.
who did you take it from?
Yeah.
And nobody talks about that either.
No
But
one
anyway.
wants to touch that.
But yeah, but this entitlement needs to change.
Yeah.
Also, the entitlement of our children, which we don't. I'm hopefully my kids I don't think my kids are like that either. Like, we're actually proud of my daughter. She's working her ass off. My older one, like, my little one's a little smarty pants, but the older one wasn't as smart with school, and then now she's
putting in
flourishing.
work.
Oh my god! And she's getting 90s and stuff too. She actually is enjoying school, and
Yeah.
she's putting the effort and making, like, it's good to see when your kids putting the effort and they're getting rewarded, how happy they are, right? Yeah, putting the numbers in there, not as a pass fail and everybody gets a participation numbers, right? So when you get somebody that is ruling a country that gives every participation numbers, this is what happens with Canada. We have a GDP lowest we've had in like freaking decades.
Yeah. And it's the mentality we've created, right? So I won't even blame the immigrants coming here. It's not even their fault, because they're seeking like a better life. So kudos to them for wanting to come here. But it's just like the government that Trudeau has created over the past, like, I'll give it 10 years, has now influenced everything, right? You see the whole culture change, which starts from like the mentality, the entitlement, to, you know, giving everyone incentives to come here without really having to work for it, not really looking at Canadians' needs per se, but more for those people who are coming in. So we got to get rid of this I'm the hero mentality, right? We've been doing that for so long, but we're neglecting the true Canadians, and we're suffering at the end of the day for it.
So based on that, once Trudeau's out, so hopefully have an election as of March. If you looked at the past 18 months, let's look at numbers. Let's finish off this talk, because we were supposed to talk more about real estate and some numbers here. We've been hovering about that $1.1 million mark for the last 18 months based on this. It's been up or below, just around the, we had a little bit higher, a little bit lower. And it's been pretty flat if you look over the last 18 months. With Trudeau out, Trump coming in, right? And hopefully Poilievre in his March, we see these numbers actually getting more over like increase. I think we're going to break that $1.1 million barrier, which we've been hovering around. Yeah. The last 3 months is indicative, like, we're pretty much back to the regular market. October was the highest of the last 3 months. We had a slight drop in November, and then December. That is a normal market, guys. Expect January. January typically happens to have like more sales because people are back in the market, because there are more desperate people selling in January if they still have a house on the market. But the average price drops. So my prediction for 2025 is going to drop. February will start to build up again. But I fully expect after March break, it's going to be like the old markets we have. The two market's going to come back.
Yes.
And I feel that it's going to come back with like hard
It's gonna
because
come surging.
remember the last few years when we had the artificially low interest rates in 2021 and 2022, some of that demand was pulled in from that were supposed to purchase and sell in 2025, pulled into that market. That's why we had 122,000 sales. Now that's over. Like, okay, that demand has now been flatlined over the last couple of years. Now we're seeing real demand. We're getting our market back. So the artificial demand was satisfied in 2021, 2022, which would have been in the last couple of years. That's also why we flatlined. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah. So remember, if you were looking to buy and sell in 23 and 24, you were buying in 21, 22 because you were scared. You wanted the low interest rates and you're scared that you were going to lose out. So instead of it going like this, it pulled it back, and that's why we had the spike. Those numbers indicated to me that we are going to have pretty strong 2025, and I expect that to happen in the springtime around March, middle of March.
And one last thing I also wanted to touch upon is the mortgage renewal trends happening over 2025, over the next 2 years, right? So a couple of stats here, like RBC, there's going to be like a mortgage war happening. RBC, 60% of RBC's customers will be renewing at lower rates in 2025. 80% of them can meet the mortgage stress test requirements, meaning they can manage higher payments. And also for TD as well, around 1/3 of mortgage renewals in 2025, 2026 will be on shorter terms, right? In anticipation of falling interest rates. And as well too, like just general market data. So 55% of all Canadian bank mortgages will be renewed in the next 2 fiscal years, right? So like looking at all these numbers, right? There's going to be like a lot of these banks who are fighting for people who are actually going to be renewing their mortgages, right?
I'm hoping RBC helps out in a couple of years when I need them. Continue fighting, guys.
So like understanding this, like, so over the 50% of mortgages in Canada, right? How might this massive renewal rate like impact like the overall buyer and seller sentiment in the coming 2 years?
So then you were like renewal rate. So
Yeah.
so with lower interest rates, right, gives you more buying power again. We're getting into that situation where things get affordable again because you're month to month. And if you're able to extend that amortization period, that also helps as well because your payments are less. So again, it's not going to be gangbusters. It's because we're not going to be dropping below the 1% or the 2% that we had before. But that also gives us fuel to the market increasing. Again, so a lot of them are renewing. They can afford the market. So now they're saying like, okay, I can afford this. Maybe they'll have it for a year or two, or maybe they're starting to look if you're able to port that mortgage somewhere else, right? So now it's more affordable, the market, and the mortgage is affordable. You can move other places, that you can port it to another property.
Yeah.
That also helps, right? That also helps with the real estate market. I don't think people are going to stay put if they don't want to be.
And with the banks at war with each other, right? I saw TD's going to look at implementing like 200,000 more jobs for Salesforce for mortgage specialists. Does this give a lot more negotiation power for the people?
Of course.
Yeah.
So one thing you guys got to remember too, and now we have to wrap up here, but
oh wow,
when your mortgage, we were like 5 minutes ago, we had 2 minutes. When I was one of my friends that we were talking to, who were on the show too, the Property Brothers, they had a video on this too, and I'm like, I didn't realize, I forgot to talk, sometimes say this to my clients as well. When your mortgage comes up for renewal, you can negotiate. You don't have to take the rate they give you. Shop around. Another thing you can always do is do like a large payment, some of them say without penalty. So before your renewal comes up, you can do like a large sum, a lot of these places, and put a lot of money down. So now your principal decreases. With your principal decreasing when you're renewing for your mortgage, your payments are going to be less, and then negotiate the rate. Talk to other banks, talk to mortgage brokers, see what they're offering you. Then a lot of people they'll go to the bank and say, well, that's what they offer. I'm like, no, ask them, like, what else can you do? I've talked to this bank. I'm literally talk with banks, talk to an agent. You know how many emails I get like on a weekly basis of the new rates from other mortgage brokers? Here's my rates. Dominion Lending, which we have an in-house Dominion Lending at Royal LePage Signature, like 4 or 5 of their agents email. They just email all the agents, everybody out. So we see what the rates are and compare. So negotiate. So if your mortgage is coming up for renewal, even 6 months before, you can start negotiating. Start. Yeah.
Start now.
Start now.
So everything.
And if interest rates are starting to decrease, you might want to hold off on it too. But start pushing them now, seeing like, okay, if I want to do this, and nowadays you don't have to do like nowadays. It's been a while, but you don't have to do like a 5-year fixed.
Yeah.
You can get into a 3-year if you think it's going to continue to decrease. Ask for other ones. Like, what are your options? Variable, fixed. Do 1-year mortgage, 2 years, 5. do not do 1 year. I think it's too much of a risk, but 5 years, 6 years, something like that. Like there's options. You could do a 1 year mortgage and then negotiate in 6 months if you anticipate the interest rates to drop, but you're going to probably be paying like a high interest rate just for those 6 months. So I would, I'm not a mortgage broker, but again, my point is, don't just go to the bank and just roll over and say, okay, I guess this is what it is. That's going to affect, I think, a lot of people. And that I think more knowledge that that homeowners have when it comes to their mortgage is going to help, first of all, cash flow in your pocket, which is going to help the economy, which will also help the real estate market.
Amazing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that episode. First one of the year, looking at the 2025 real estate predictions. David provided us with a lot of numbers here that we should be mindful of. If you're looking at perhaps buy or sell, contact DC over here. You know where to find us.
Always open to help, everything. Even if you're leasing, people don't understand. People call me for like, do you lease? I'm like, yeah. Do you do commercial? Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Like,
he does it all.
We do it all, man.
He does it all. So thank you for tuning in. It's an amazing start to the year so far. Hope you're all having a positive mindset as we head into this year. I know 2024 was a tough on a lot of people, but let's keep the faith. Let's keep the positivity. And we'll see you next week for an episode with Mr.
Oh, we're doing Tony Coleo.
Tony Kaleo. It's going to be a good one, guys. We'll see you then. Cheers.